The answer to how to vote, therefore, is vote for righteousness. It's quite simple. Don't vote for the widest motorway or the fattest welfare check or the new childcare centre on the corner. Vote for, at a macro level, right and wrong. Obviously, it's never a perfect choice. You've got people who are really wrong and people who are mostly wrong. And you've got to make a judgment between them. It's not easy these days, but vote for the one who you truly believe will promote that which is good and restrain that which is evil more than the other, because that's what we're called to vote for. Can I make this point as well? This is kind of important these days. Just note that government is a category that is distinct from the individual. That sounds really obvious, but the reason I say it is this: there is a great confusion sometimes out there between the government's job and the individual's job. There'll be a lot of people out there who will vote for a government on the basis of love of neighbour because of charitable causes and all this kind of thing. Just be a little bit careful about that, because when it comes to charity, when it comes to loving your neighbour, when it comes to doing good works, when it comes to all those sorts of things, that's your job, right? It's not their job first, it's your job first. Charity begins at home. And there's a lot of people out there who are outsourcing their love of neighbour to the state and feeling really good about it. And it's costing them not one thing. Just note that the epitome of neighbour love was the Good Samaritan story. The Good Samaritan was a guy who went to great lengths. He took risks. He spent his time. He spent his own money. He ministered to a bloke who should have hated him. He did an extraordinary thing. He stumbled upon someone and he invested himself into that person as an act of love. That is neighbour love. Whatever the government does isn't neighbour love. I'm not saying that, all the programs the government runs are wretched and worthless and to be torn up. I don't think that at all. But I am saying just get your thinking clear on this. Neighbour love is your job. Your job. And there should be costly things that you do in your life for the sake of others, not just put a number on a ballot. It's not the same thing. And you may vote for government for the best of reasons and because they've got great policies, but it ain't really the same thing as loving your neighbour, which is important. The best way you can love your neighbour through government, right, is that you vote for the government that is going to uphold righteousness, because that's God's plan for them and that's what's good for everybody. It's interesting, just on that as an aside, people talk a lot about neighbour love these days. Love of neighbour, love of neighbour, love of neighbour. And it's very often used in isolation from all other values. The command to love your neighbour is deliberately and intrinsically connected to the command to love God. It says the greatest commandment is to love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind, and with all your strength. And the second is like it, says Jesus. In other words, it's consistent with it. It's grounded in it. It's of the same kind of thing. Love your neighbour as yourself. So the point being, you love God. You know what will happen? When you're doing what God requires of you, you're also going to be loving your neighbour in accordance with God's definition. If you break love of neighbour down and take it away from love of God, what you end up doing is just doing what other people want. And measuring love by their desires, their feelings, their demands. That's not how it works. God has said what is good for you, what is good for them. So honour God first and you'll find loving neighbour a lot easier. And it should always be consistent with that. And you will find that if you're voting for righteousness, you are actually loving your neighbour because that's God's requirement of government.